Good evening. This talk I've done on and off over the last 15 or so years. It's always been a point of discussion as to what is the paranormal. And there's never ever really a conclusive idea as to what it is, where it comes from. It all seems to have everybody seems to have a different idea as to what it is. So I thought I would always put my four penn'orth in, and this being no different. Now for me, if you're going to start to investigate a cultural or an ideological or even a theological idea, you always, to my mind, you need to start off where you have been as a society, as a people, because that always leads up to where you are now. So for me, that's quite easy. I can just go down the archaeological, or I can go down the sociological, anthropological route. Whichever way, archaeology seems to sort of always end up with the answers that I need to find. So society has changed numerous number of times over the millennia. There's even changes in society caused by the environment. For example, if we go back to sort of 12,000 BCE, this is what Britain looked like. You could walk from France to Cornwall, from Cornwall to Ireland. So the cultural ideas were moving with the peoples as they came across. And one of the oldest peoples that were actually in the UK that had a culture, that had a spirituality, is a group of people known as the Neanderthals. Their proper name is Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, sometimes referred to as Neans. This is a society that is far more complex than we give them credit for. And if I was going to recommend any further reading, then these two people, Van Peeboer and Rebecca Ragg-Sykes, has done an incredible amount of work understanding Neanderthals. They were very much like us, same type of brain, same capabilities, physiologically different, because they had to deal with persistence hunting rather than chase hunting. So they were shorter, stronger, they lived in heavily wooded areas. They're not icemen, as people give them an idea. They would have travelled across the ice, but they didn't live in the ice. But the Neanderthals is an incredibly intelligent species, a very strong community, very strong spirituality. But they're not the originals. There is another group prior to that called the Heidelbergensis, and they are the progenitors of both Neanderthals, also Denisovans, Floriensis, as well as us. The complexity of it is that the Heidelbergensis that was in Europe gave rise to the Neanderthals. The Heidelbergensis, now renamed Rhodophensis, gave rise to humans in Africa. So our first humans that actually has any sense of spirituality, so therefore our potential paranormal, is our Neanderthals. And they were widespread right the way from the Far East right into southern Britain. Now the thing about Neanderthals, we have an idea that sort of led to what they look like, some sort of brute ape-man type, and in reality they were nothing like that. Yes, there were the physiological differences. You could see the stronger brow, wider mouth, bigger nose. But other than that, they pretty much could pass away, as one of us, just with stronger features. They had a stronger DNA than what humans do, but a lot of their DNA is actually in us. But did they have the idea or concept of paranormal? We've got cave paintings where they've left their unique handprints, hunting. Some of their artwork is extraordinary. And you think, this is the pictures I'm showing you now. These are not humans that have done this. These are Neanderthals that's done these amazing imagery. But I said to you that they had a heightened spirituality. So they created this. Now this is Brunequel Cave in France, first discovered in 1990. It had been buried for 300,000 years, so there are no humans ever been in here. This is a Neanderthal ritual site. I know I sound like a real archaeologist now. But when you look at it, they're creating a circle, a space. There's no burning. This is purely a ritual or a ceremonial space that they enter into, and they use and they communicate, because we know that they can talk, and they've certainly got a sufficient intelligence to have a language. This is what the plan looks like. Interestingly enough, as a circle with two structures in the middle, we see that repeated in many human places. This is one of the circles in Göbekli Tepe. See the circle, we see the 2 points. Even in the very early stages of henge building, humans built a henge and they had 2 mark points. Even in my own circle, I create a circle with 2 key points. Now I know why I create that as a left and a right, a positive and negative, the masculine and the feminine. It's only circumspection, but do Neanderthals also have that concept? We never know, they never wrote it down. But another way to sort of see how their spirituality could lead to a sense of the paranormal is the way they treat their dead. And it's usually the dead as usually the most problematic in any culture. What do you do with them? And interestingly, these are both Neanderthals. The one on the left is male, the one on the right is female. Both of them are buried in a fetal position. It looks like they're on their backs, but they're not. They were originally on their sides. And what's happened is, as the body is decomposed, it's left a void, and the void is sufficiently large enough for the body to flop over inside that void. They have a reverence to their dead, but they don't exclude their dead. Their dead is in the same place as where they live, so they're not ostracized. They don't fear them. But most Neanderthals were hunter-gatherers like early humans, and through excavations they actually found that they will revisit burial places and, of all things, put flowers on the grave, because obviously over time you get layers or stratifications build up, so you get a sedimentary layer, then you get an organic, and then you get another sedimentary layer, and then you get an organic. That's them revisiting the grave year or years later and remembering who that person, or that they were a relative, and no fear, no worry about it. They sleep in the same cave as their ancestors are buried. So there's no concept of a fearful event, or they have a fear of the dead, or that the dead wander. So there seems to be no evidence that they have a concept of a paranormal world, of one to be cautious of, or one to be fearful of, or one that could be problematic. It's all inclusive. So if Neanderthals, who was one of the most successful versions of humans, I mean, they were around for 500,000 years, which is still 3 times longer than we've been here. So they were very successful, and they haven't died out through crossbreeding between us as a species and them as a species. They slowly faded away into us, because anywhere between 2 to 10% of our DNA is Neanderthal, including the genetic memory. We have other humans, commonly known as Homo sapiens, but that's a group name. There are many others under that guise. For example, Homo sapiens adultu, also known as Hertu man. This is what he looks like. As a species, they weren't successful, but we know of him because of the reverence that was shown to his dead body. Very similar to Neanderthals, it was buried in the fetal position. It was cared for, it was tended, and eventually that species, or that branch of species of human, died out, like many others did, leaving only us, Homo sapiens sapiens. That's our correct name. We often refer to as Homo sapiens, but Homo sapiens is the hominid group, which includes many others. So where do we go with this one? Well, the only place to start really we have any kind of evidence is obviously through the Mesolithic period, to give you an idea of what humans looked like then. Yeah, we were, the one on the left is known as Cheddar Man, and the one on the right, there's 500 years difference between the two. She's known as Cheddar Woman, and she was found in the next cave along from Cheddar Man. There's an ancestor to Cheddar Man still alive and not that far away. Both of them are dark skinned because at this point in time the mutation that would lead on to Caucasoids hadn't happened, and the majority of us we're Caucasian in nature, but we're not Caucasoids because we don't actually have that gene. They pretty much died out. If you're able to tan, you're not a Caucasoid. You're a Caucasian by evolution, not by DNA. Their world is very, very different. The same as Neanderthals. Some of them would have even met Neanderthals. Some of them would have even mated with Neanderthals. But a lot of human technology that we were using at the time came from Neanderthals, particularly like stone axes and such like. We can see humans developing that type of technology of a thing that was already made 200, 300, 400,000 years before. So the Neanderthals taught us how to do it. And equally, at the same time, some of their philosophies and methods and theological ideas also came with it, because humans would treat each other with the same level of reverence. They would care for each other. We've seen evidence of Neanderthals looking after a sick person. And we've seen people with, or skeletons with, severe injuries as a result of hunting. And we know that that person has been cared for, both in humans and Neanderthals, because the bones have shown callousing, which is healing. I mean, some would have had very, very serious head injuries, so they might not have even been capable of feeding themselves. And they might have been a very different person, personality-wise, but yet they were still cared for. So we know that both species, even at this stage, has a heightened spirituality. The way they looked after each other. Even in their cave art, very similar. We see examples of what they're looking for, or even what they're hoping for, or what they're intending to do, or maybe a scene where there was a successful hunt. We don't see any evidence of stress. This is not a population of people that is under stress. They've got food. They can hunt. The rest of the time they will rest. Now there's an interesting archaeological find that showed the heightened idea of spirituality, but also the lack of fear that that spirituality has. Now this young lady had a full DNA profile. Her body was in a sufficient state to actually show that she was an albino. So she was lily white, with white hair. She would have had pink eyes. This is in a society where Caucasians don't exist yet. So everybody around her is dark skinned. She would have stood out. There is no fear. The way that she's treated, that's a swan's wing, by the way, at her burial. The assumption is because she was buried with what was a newborn, the impression that we have of it is that she died through childbirth, and equally the infant did so also. She looks strapped up, but that was just so she could hold the pose of holding her baby. She wore beads around her ankles, her wrists, her head, around her waist, and almost with the artifacts that she was buried with would suggest that she was held in as a type of shaman. That the differences that she exhibited by being an albino was sufficient enough for the societies around her to see her as some form of shaman or shamanic, including the fact that there's some poor swan somewhere just had his wing ripped off, just so that her and her baby had a soft mattress to lie on as she was being buried. Now that is quite a story, to think that being this one white-skinned, white-haired person amongst a coloured community, she would have been held in fear or in contempt, not protected, not cared for. So if she was part of the paranormal ideology that they might have had, they had no fear of it. And this is one of the things that comes up the most with all of these societies. I mean, this is a highly stylized picture, but there's no evidence of fear. A society that is under duress, under stress, and is fearful, you often see that in the tools they prepare, the artwork that they display, the way that they treat the dead. There's no evidence of anything of that nature leaving a sort of a fearful. So we come forward in time, we come to the Neolithic. This is the point where humanity is now becoming stable. It's no longer transient. There are hunter-farmers, because not all cereal farmers were successful. In actual fact, the majority of them actually died out rather quickly through malnutrition. Those that continued hunting or eventually ended up corralling cattle carried on, and this is what we look like. We have now the Caucasian gene filtering his way through, but the majority of the people are still quite olive skinned. Their artwork is not a great deal different. We know that the Mesolithic and the very early Neolithic are matriarchal societies, and we see scenes of hunting, scenes of planning, even scenes of self-identification. If you look at the handprints on the top left, this is a definite statement of "this is me, I was here." And again, we see a society that has no fear and actually erects places. These are long barrow tombs where people have access. The top left is one where the soil has slumped away, just leaving the stones. The top right is all that's left of a passage tomb, showing the sort of chambers, and the bottom two is two that's still intact, both of which are in Ireland. The most famous one is Newgrange, that's the one on the right. Now these are places where the dead are placed. They're not closed in, they're not shut in. People wander in to see their ancestor, to maybe talk to them or get some kind of solace from seeing granny or granddad or mum or dad or brother or sister, whatever. They're even brought out during certain key times, so they're participating. So again, even in this very early Neolithic time, there is no fear of the dead. So at the moment we are struggling really to find out what we could define as being paranormal, because as far as all of these peoples, going back to the Neanderthals, this is just normal. This is just everyday life. This is what it is. I'll show you a little bit more in detail of these. This is going to take time and effort. This is going to take energy to clear the space, to move all those stones, to move all that soil over. This is something that people are prepared to dedicate their time and their energy to create this necropolis for the ancestors. And like I said, the insides are open. You can come and go as you please. Once they're placed inside, You can come and go, you can visit, you can even bring grandma out for the day. But again, even for those that don't make it into those tombs, we see that they're buried with reverence in places earmarked that they can revisit again and again. This is an interesting set. These barrows are huge. This is just up the road from us here in a place called Tap House. There's East, Middle and West Tap House. And these barrows are huge. Those are not bushes on top of these barrows. Those are trees. That's how big they are. This is a place where the dead can be seen. And we know where they are and we can find them. And that is just quite amazing. And the most famous one obviously is Stonehenge. This is a place of the dead, you know. I mean, a lot of the modern pagans see this as, you know, for example, we've got the summer solstice, so everybody's going to be there to see. But intrinsically, this is the place of the dead. There's over 60,000 burials, sort of pot burials, all the way around. I'll show you this sort of. You think Stonehenge is in the middle of there. You've got the domain of the ancestors in the centre, which is sort of Neolithic, and then outside of that, you've got the Bronze Age burials. They're all using this one common place where this is the realm of the dead. Durrington Walls and Woodhenge is for the living, and the newly dead are taken down the River Avon, up through the avenue to Stonehenge, and then from there they would have been deposited in some other place. What's interesting is the people that are using this most commonly are not the people that built it. That gets complicated, doesn't it? The first peoples that were the farmers is what's known as the Western Farming Group. That's a highly imaginable name to give a society. But the next people that followed after that is the Bell Beaker peoples. They replaced the original Western farmer. They did not build the stone circles or the henges or anything else. And neither did the Celts that followed in after the Bell Beaker. Okay? So this is a society that's very ancient and only briefly gave us all these amazing monuments. Oh, and if you look down on the right hand side where you see the River Avon curve outward, almost like a kind of finger, they venerated that area because in the Mesolithic time this was a principal settlement for the Mesolithic peoples before they became, and all this where Stonehenge is now was the hunting ground. And the reason why this little area became so popular is because there is a flint there that when air dried goes from the normal black blue to bright purple, and that is an act of magic because you're dealing with a world of browns and greens, and suddenly you have this thing that goes purple. Is this your paranormal? They're not running from it. Excavations show that they actually settled there for extended periods of time and actually led on to this whole complex of Durrington Walls and Woodhenge and Stonehenge, or the precursors to it, being part and parcel of this. So if this is the paranormal, they have immersed themselves right in the center. Again, we see no evidence of fear. I thought I'd throw this one in because right in the center there, next to the two roundabouts, is our own little henge. This is Castilie Henge, just outside of Llanidid, which is just outside of Bodmin. It's been there for sort of 4,500 years. They also now recently, through excavations, found that it had a stone circle. And interestingly enough, and coincidentally, the stone circle is the same diameter as the circle that I used to create in the picture you saw earlier. So, again, this is a very stylized picture of Neolithic life. Certain crops are being grown, mostly barley or wheat type. Cattle, sheep. That's the most important dietary. But these people are now becoming settled. They're becoming part with the landscape, and they are not ostracizing the dead. They're integrating again with the living. And we see this example in so many places. Thornborough Henges, the three of them together, a unification. Why they were done in that particular way, we have no idea. We can only guess. But we have areas for the living and an area dedicated for the dead, and a communion between the two. It's seen again and again. On the right hand side is a Minotaur. That used to be, it's a bit of a mashup of things now, but this is the entrance to a passage tomb. That's what it was originally designed for, and that passage tomb is now all slumped away and disappeared. But it looks very good because you've got a megalith in one front and a megalith in the back, and then you've got this circular. This has now been set up much later, through excavations actually found what was underneath. The dates varied enormously, so that you can say this was not here when that was first put here. This appeared thousands of years later. So this is part and parcel of a passage tomb, which is long since washed away, including anything that was found in it. So again, with the dead, they're spending time and effort to make a nice place. A place that the living can also access, as well as the dead can leave. So again, no fear. We move up into the Bronze Age. We have now sort of very much a different set of people. So the Celts are now coming in. They're bringing with them new technology, and albeit with bronze, copper and bronze, you have a whole new stream of weaponry. So violence is increasing. The sense of this is mine is appearing. The population is growing, but there is sufficient to go around. But they are now starting to pick up in tribes, and albeit they are treating the dead well, there is now an exclusion. You're not from here, so go back to where you belong. This begins to sound familiar, doesn't it? So if you're not from this tribe, you have to go back to your other tribe for them to deal with you if you're dead, because you belong to them. So this tribalism and this sense of singular identity is kicking in. But if you're part of that group, then you'll be protected, buried with artifacts to ensure that in the next life you're going to have the same joys, same comforts as what you had here. Even whole families are sometimes buried together And unfortunately, this family unit, as you can see by the damages that was done to the chest, these are as a result of violence. And now in the Neolithic we don't see that many examples of death by violence, more death by impalement from an oryx or something like that. But we still don't see any real evidence of the paranormal, i.e. something to be fearful of, something to be excluded from at this stage. Now everything goes to pot towards the back end of the Bronze Age, because there is a massive, it's known as the Bronze Age collapse. Now some people sort of say it's an idea that a massive plague hit. Well, I'm a doctor of archaeology and not a doctor of medicine, but to me a disease is not selective. And the fact that 94% of males were wiped out Europe-wide, going right the way across from the sort of Levant right into Britain, to such an extent there was 1 male to every 17 females. Just enough to be able to sustain it. In actual fact, our modern society, we are part of one of 5 family groups when it comes to patriarchal DNA. That's quite scary that we never even made it. But we have the round barrow to thank. Most of them down in Cornwall and in Ireland, the soil around has been washed away, slumped away. These are not, unlike the long barrows where Joe and Jane Bloggs can go in there, this is select. This is chieftain. This is the chief, the big man, the community leader, whatever way they led it. This is the person that would get led and buried in there. He would be venerated. We're now seeing a patriarchal society develop where the leader of the community, the chief, warrior chief, whatever way, he's the one that's being venerated. Everybody else, well, they get cremated, you get put in the pot, and you can be buried in the side of it. But in some cases you may be buried near it, like little ossuaries can be created in the ground. We don't see any idea of separation of the dead and the living. We don't see any sort of real evidence of a paranormal world, one that has to be kept at arm's length or one that has to be controlled. We don't see the votive offerings to ancestors and this sort of thing. You're pretty much put into the ground and say, right, see ya, and then everybody gets on with their lives. Even here at Stonehenge, on the outer edge, in the Bronze Age burials, we see they're just being buried close to a very, at this point, it would be very ancient. You think when the Celts arrived in the UK, this was already a very ancient site and will still be used. And we see it length and the breadth of the country. Old sites, old Neolithic sites, are used again and again in the latter part of the Bronze Age. They don't necessarily understand what the original purpose of these sites were, but they're certainly not scared of them. Our next stage is the Iron Age, and this is where everything goes to hell in a handbag. The Iron Age is a point where, particularly here in the British Isles, things take a nosedive. We are disconnected from Europe, we're disconnected from Ireland because of rising sea levels. Doggerland has disappeared. We are on our own. The occasional vessel that might cross between France and the south of England, but other than that, and it starts to go horrendously wrong. We now got a completely patriarchal society. There is no real room for spirituality anymore. This is a case of survival. Food is very meager. A lot of land is now overused and turning into moorland. We don't see any real major art of the ordinary person. They are now no longer robust. They're sickly, probably through malnutrition primarily, because all they've got is grains. But now we do see fear. Not fear of the unknown, but fear of the known. Yes, these communities are tribal, but, and this is where we see the hill forts, which is a bit of a misnomer because they're not really forts, they're just fortified villages. Because you may have a top spot on the top of the hill and the land around that hill is fertile and is able to be used. Your neighbour on the hill on the other side is looking at you and thinking, I need that. And the next thing you know, you're being attacked. Not because you're an enemy, but because you have resources that they lack. And you can always tell a hill fort, like I said, it's a mispronunciation of what they really are. If it's a single ditch and bank, then they never survived. If it's got two, they carried on. If it's got three, they did really well. The more banks and ditches, the more fortifications, the longer that community, and they did so by destroying the others around them and taking on board their resources. And we can actually see in Cornwall here, you can actually see they're actually, instead of being in the heart of the land in the most fertile areas, they are moving towards the coastline. Because obviously on the coast, on the cliff, you've got protection behind you. So you only have to deal with who's in front. Strategically, it makes sense. But now we really do see exclusivity. If you are a leader or part of that upper hierarchy, you will get buried with honors. If you are not part of that elite society, your body just gets dumped. If you are part of a defending, as you can see on the left one there, and you are hacked down, and this guy was, you can actually see his leg, it's been hacked, so is his hand been removed. They went to town on this person and they just left him there. The top right hand side is just where bodies, dead people, have just been stacked into a cave. Any sense of spirituality, any sense of compassion or reverence for the dead no longer exists in the Iron Age. It's kill or be killed. You either live or you die. And the landscape is pockmarked with these settlements, these defensive on high ground to be able to ensure they can see who was coming, and it would be all often not be their neighbours looking to steal resources from them. Which brings a sort of idea as to the Romano-British Age. A lot of people have this idea that the Romans invaded Britain. They didn't. In a lot of cases, they were asked, they were welcomed in. People just got tired of raids, tired of having no food, no opportunity, fighting to stay alive. So more often than not, the Romans came in, saw potential, brought new vegetables, new types of wheat, new farming techniques, and suddenly society becomes a little bit more robust, a bit healthier. These are still Celts. They're not excluded out into the four corners of Britain, but they are becoming Romanized. There's still some that will kick up that they don't like to be occupied, or they don't want to pay tax to Rome or whatever. You will always have that in every culture. But on the whole, Britain, and there's also a sense of spirituality coming back, because the Romans at this point are pagan. They bring their versions of the gods and goddesses, match them up with the Celts' versions of the gods and goddesses, the most famous one being Sulis and Minerva, the Roman one being Minerva, the Celtic one being Sulis. We find temples, and this is how Rome really did do things very well, very successful, because they would adapt their spirituality to fit in with the spirituality of the people that they were now beginning to occupy. And if the two match, then people are more content. You challenge a person's belief and you're going to have a fight on your hands. But you adapt yours to match theirs, they get a lot happier. And we see the veneration again with the dead. They're treated nicely. They're mourned. And the way that they're treated is with respect and reverence. And you have now the opportunity to revisit your ancestors like you once did. And slowly but surely, society, for at least 400 years, did well, and people lived reasonably well. They ate reasonably well, or certainly a lot better than what their Iron Age. And even with the fact that Christianity came in with the latter part of the Roman Empire, the enforcement of Christianity by the Romans at this point, like I said, they know full well, they try to push religion or push against the religion of a country, you're going to have problems. So the people are still pagan, even though the Romans themselves, including those that are here, have adopted Christianity. Some have adopted both. So we have a very flourishing spirituality where there are places that you can worship shared gods and goddesses. But again, we don't have this idea of fear. That's the big onus on this. It's what fear there is fear of consequences of wrongdoing, not of the deceased. The next stage after the Romans is obviously the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes. Although the period is called Anglo-Saxon, there is no species called Anglo-Saxon. So if you are English, you are either an Anglese, Anglo, or you are a Saxon. Either way, you're Germanic. You're part of the Germanic tribes. Even though you now classify yourself English, you are still part of haplogroup R2, which is Germanic. They're pagan. they're following on a very similar sort of ideology as the Norse, because instead of Odin they've got Woden, but they've got Thor, and they've got Freya and Frigg, and well, I think they call it Frigg rather than Freya, I think. But they too did adapt to the sort of Roman idea. But here we now have a major displacement of peoples. The Celts are now being driven back. This is not a case of the Angles and Saxons and Jutes coming in to integrate, although they do in some areas, but in the majority of areas there is a pushback. And this is where we now have Cornwall, Wales, Scotland, and obviously the Isle of Man and Ireland as being all Celt. If you actually were able to draw a line, you can pretty much see a circle between Brittany and Scotland. Celts on the left, Angles and Saxons on the right. Now, like I said, the Anglos and Saxons have their own sort of idea, which is very closely attributed to the Norse. But they are in competition with each other, because if you think from the sort of 700s onwards, you've got Viking raids. So even though the Angles and Saxons were of a similar ilk, they are not seen as a common foe. Spirituality wise, the way they treated the dead in the early days of Anglo-Saxon settlement, it is with reverence, but as time goes on we see a more controlled and contrived patriarchy, particularly as Christianity now starts to come into society. Now, the point that I'm trying to get across here about the paranormal is the idea of the paranormal is something outside of the normal, like the supernatural is above or beyond the natural. And through studies, through excavations, through analysis, by looking at various types of art, even from the Neanderthals through to humans in modern day, we don't see any contrivance. It's all just taken on board as normal. Death is normal. It's not supernatural, it's not paranormal, it's just normal. So they're perceiving the world around them, they're very much aware of the world around them, they're very much developing a control of the world around them. But they have no fear of it. They have no fear of the dark. They don't have any fear of the dead. They'll quite happily go from the village one particular night, they'll wake up and they want to think, I want to go see Mum, I want to go see Dad. They'll walk down to the passage tomb, go in, have a conversation in the middle of the night with the skeletal remains of a lost one, a parent, a grandparent. That's the fact that that can exist, and that they'll leave food, they'll leave drink for them, shows that there is absolutely no concept that this is outside of normal, that this is paranormal. This is just normal, and that is a bit of a wake-up call. Now, if the Iron Age was not bad enough, well, this one is. We now have the rise of Christianity. First in the Saxons, what you see here are classic examples of Saxon churches. They are very much aware of the world around them. They have no fear of the dark. They don't have any fear of the dead. They have no fear of the dark. They don't have any fear of the dead. They have no 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 fear of the dead. They have A lot of them would be wood, but some of them were made of stone, but they were always typical by having small windows and round towers. And they were pretty much like converted barns. Didn't have side chapels or anything else like that. And it didn't seem to be sort of any hard and fast rule about how Christianity was even developed. It was just something that seemed to run along with the existing and eventually replaced the sort of original Saxon beliefs of Woden. Woden just become God, one God. It's only when we see 1066. This is when the French arrive. Now, this is where things start to get tough. The Normans, oddly enough, are descendants of a Viking called Rollo. So, Norman is short, or as a corruption of the term of Northman. So as if we had problems with the Vikings in the north, we now have problems with the Vikings in the south, albeit they are now French Vikings, if that's a possibility. But they bring with them a very strong identity, a very strong, forceful Christianity. They are French, they are nobles. The Saxons are not. We have the beginnings of serfdom. They are servants, they are slaves, they are effectively a subjugated society. Their value is nothing more than what they can produce. And we see that with the classic architecture. This is, apart from the Motte and Bailey castles and then eventually the Norman castles, even with the churches, with the tall towers, big windows, striking edifices. This is a elite making its mark on people that they look down upon. And this is now really where we now have the age of religion, where religion and politics are one and the same. The state is the religion is the state. Religious law is state law. You either follow religious law, or you are seen as a heathen or as a heretic or as an apostate, and you are immediately executed. And that might involve either being hung or broken on the wheel or gibbeted or even immolated, which is burning at the stake. That's an expensive one. They try to avoid that. But whatever way, they are doing an enforcement. Now we start to see fear really take hold. What you see there is the main religions that exist even today that are state sanctioned: Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Shinto, Sikhism, Judaism, Hinduism, and Taoist. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are pretty much one and the same thing. They're all the three Abrahamic religions. They are the three that spend most time at war with each other. Christianity against Islam, Islam against Judaism, Judaism against Christianity. It's a three-way split. They all believe in the same bloody God, but they spend all the time killing each other in the name of the same God. Hinduism is, although it's classified as sort of the major religion, and there is over 1 billion people that follow it, that is still a polytheistic or effectively pagan. And India, and you don't really hear this on any other news or media, but they have a hell of a problem with Islamic extremists and terrorism. I think the last time that the news was the hotel at Goa, where Islamic extremists blew it up and killed dozens of holidaymakers. But anyway, Christianity is where it's at here, and the state and the church are one. So therefore there's an enforcement, but they're also now starting to control all aspects of life. Now there's a question: what's the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery? Well, a graveyard is in a church. It's in the churchyard. An area of the churchyard is given for graves, so it becomes a graveyard. A cemetery is a separate place that is not part of the church, but is and may well be sanctified and validated by the church. So already we have segregation. People of nobility, or people that are noted as parts of the community, more often than not will get buried in the churchyard, or in the graveyard in the churchyard closest to the church, maybe even in the church. Joe Bloggs, the Saxon, you're out in the field somewhere. You might have the opportunity of a priest to say something over you, or you might actually have a pagan do something instead. Not that they really care, but death is now controlled, and it still is, even to this day. Only a state sanctioned, like a crematorium or the Church of England, can deal with the dead body. Just recently, I think it was last year, there was a pagan that his wish was that he would be buried on his land in a wicker basket, and it was done properly. He was buried 6 feet down, so it meant there was no water table that could be tarnished or anything else like that. His daughter that did all this got charged with misuse of a dead body and the prevention of a lawful burial. He was exhumed and then put into a cemetery. So his dying wish was completely ignored because the state, i.e. through the church, had decided that he had no right, that he had to be buried as in accordance to what was originally a religious edict. Now, this religion, called Christianity, is determined to maintain your following. You are not going to be an apostate. If you become an apostate, they will crucify you. If you believe in something else, if you're a heathen, they will burn you or hang you. If you bring a religion into disrepute, you are heresy, you will be boiled alive if it's medieval times, or if not, incinerated or hung. Whichever one was the cheapest and whichever one was handy. This is going to make people fearful. It's the church that starts to introduce this idea of devils and demons are waiting to take you. If you do not behave, if you do not be productive, you get soothed by these ideas that even if you work and work and work and work till it kills you, and your boss now becomes a very, very rich man as a result of your labors, don't worry. He can't take it with him. As if that's going to make things easier for you. The other one is, you work hard, you'll get your reward in heaven. Yeah, I would rather have the reward now so I can feed my family. So I have these ideas of that if you don't, you'll go to hell. There'll be demons at the door waiting for you to consume your body continuously for all infinity. Weird, strange creatures ready to torment you or to turn you off the path of righteousness. This is where we're starting to see the paranormal. It's an invention. And of course, it's a patriarchal society. So we've got to take into account original sin. Woman, the worst demon of them all. We have to be so careful of them because they are so weak, they can be easily drawn into temptation. You must control your woman, because if not, Satan will. And Hollywood has taken up on that theme, and so we have this idea that whenever you see a horror movie, the bad guy is always some demonic presence, a woman possessed by it, threatening civilization. Of course, we all know that's absolute claptrap. This is an invention by the church to scare people in abeyance. There's also another interesting point that comes with this. We are told that monarchy is the civilized way. Now, every country in the world is actually a monarchy. Now, don't confuse the archetype of monarchy as being with, like us, the monarchy, like King Charles. If you have a single commander or authority at the apex of the pyramid, like a president, yeah, or a chancellor, or something of that nature, someone at the very top of the pyramid, that pyramid is a monarchy, i.e. one archetype. Anarchy is self-rule, and yet we are always told that anarchy is anarchic, it's chaos, it's uncivilized. Yeah? If you've got a community that wants to rule itself, that's an anarchic society. An meaning all, mon meaning one. So we're forced into this idea that a single leader is the civilized monarchical way of how society should be run. And there's got this idea of trickle down economics, because we don't want the plebeians to become too wealthy and if they become too wealthy, they become a threat, or they themselves become a monarch in that sense. Because like Elon Musk just recently, he's now the richest man in the world. He's richer than some countries. So he has a power and an authority that money can buy. Yeah, I know, Karen, you can bury anyone on private land, but you have to get a permit first. And getting those permits is very, very rare. There has to be excavations to see whether not, or where the water table is, with not any seepage by body liquor can seep into any groundwater tables and this sort of thing and contaminate. And that's why cemeteries are placed where they are. So there are new long barrows. It took them 22 years to get them legally established, and they can only hold cremated remains. So as much as they say you can bury anybody on private land, when you get down to the realities of the legalities to it, it doesn't happen. And that's what happened to this young woman. She got convicted. He's not a British trillionaire. It doesn't matter what nationality he is. He is his own nationality now. He's got his own. He's actually South African of birth, but Musk has now got sufficient amount of money that he can dictate. A lot of them, like Jeff Bezos, they got more money than sense, but they can now dictate. People like Amazon, SpaceX, they have an unprecedented amount of power over any government. And they know that. That's why they're interfering with our own politics. Anywho, moving on. The main aspect of Christianity, and this also follows in Judaism as well as in Islam, is this invention of an alternative world that is a threat to your eternal soul. And this is the only real time that I, in my opinion, sees the idea of paranormal. It's a contrivance that's used for social control. In the past, Buddhism has used it by inventing this idea of karma, which is originally Indian. Yeah, the idea of karmic cycling, where you continue through life after life after life after life after life, gaining and gaining and gaining until you get to a point where you're able to break that cycle and release the karma. The Buddhists took hold of it and had it with the idea that if you do not obey and you are not principled in this lifetime, then you will come back as something worse. So even the Buddhists have actually done this and used the idea of fear in the afterlife, that something will get you and put you back as something you don't want to be. Just about every principled religion has done it. The only one that hasn't done that is Hinduism. Yeah, they're pretty much quite liberal about that. Yes, you will suffer the consequences of your own actions. You will have to deal with that in yourself, because your own morality will eventually come to bite you in the ass. But there is no sort of thing out there that's going to sort of spend his life munching on you in Hellraiser fashion. Not so much. See again, Hellraiser, yeah? The idea that there is this world out there full of demons and unusual creatures that are just waiting to feast on you. Yeah, there are some nasty spirits out there, but they certainly don't have that level of power over you. You know, you just kick them into touch like you do with anybody else. It's actually easier if you're in spirit form to kick them into touch than what you do in your physical form, because it's going to be outside of your realm of accessibility. But there's certainly, and this is the other aspect of it as well, is that we've all been brought up, we're all Christianized. Even though we're a pagan, our upbringing, our socialization is Christianized because our society is Christian based. Even our laws are Christian based. So we have been Christianized even though we're not Christian. So we still have to deal with that. And you can see that with people, because you think, you know, this person is going out to being as a practicing witch, and yet they're afraid of the dark. You think, what the hell? You're a witch. You live in the dark. You know, what is there to be scared of? Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm afraid of the dark.
Not because you're afraid of what's out there, but
No,
afraid of falling over something.
Because I can't see.
Yeah, that's a rational one. If you're eyesight is a bit dicey and you don't have any night sight and you go out in the dark, yeah, fair enough, take a torch with you, because you're going to end up falling over and hurting yourself. But there's people that are afraid of the dark because they're afraid of the demons. And you're a goddamn pagan. You're supposed to be a witch. Behave like one. There's nothing out there that can hurt you. You're more of a threat than anything else out there. You know? That just doesn't make sense to me sometimes. So how much more can we do with this? There's an intriguing thing about humans, and there's a whole new series of sciences that come up to it. Clinical neuropsychology, neuropsychiatry. I've shown you this before in many places. The human brain is actually able to pick up on electromagnetic fields, emanations that come from different sources, including spirit. Now, some spirit is mischievous, particularly if they're elementals. They'll just sort of give you the idea as to why they're doing something, because they themselves are fearful of you and your energy, so they might present themselves as some kind of weird, obtuse creature in your psyche to be careful of them. Again, that's a rational, a reaction. The pictures I got up there now. This is a form of low energy, low frequency electromagnetic field transmitters that transmit straight into the brain. You can actually buy your own now. It's called Flow Neuroscience. This one is used by the NHS as well as a lot of other health authorities to actually be able to combat depression, particularly bipolar. It's been very successful in the sufferers of bipolar, of reducing the amount of, because apparently that sort of medication is pretty potent stuff and can send you just as wacky as what the condition down. But it does actually reduce the depression and evens out your moods. But it does actually show that the brain can be influenced by external sources. So this idea that you've got mischievous spirits out there, well aware of the fact, probably because they themselves have been brought up in the idea of superstition and paranormal, are now using that idea to exploit, to get a boost of energy, or to just to be bloody minded about it, which is a nuisance. So realistically, the paranormal is an invention to ensure that you, as a citizen, obey the rules, obey the religion. And if we go back to what our ancestors used to do, they didn't have the paranormal, they just had the normal. Everything was just normal. And at the end of the day, you're just going to be a source of energy with a consciousness. You're an orb with a mind that for a little while has the opportunity to hijack some primate called Homo sapiens, give them a whole bunch of anxiety for the entirety of their life before the body quits, and then we're back to square one. Just norm. Energy with consciousness. That's the normality, that's the infinity, that's the eternity. You can come and go as you please. You can see who you please. You can exchange ideas and thoughts with each other. But if you want to experience things in the first hand, you're going to need a body. As it says, we're not human beings having spiritual experiences. We're spirits having human experiences. That's the best saying of it all. That's just normal. We're surrounded by spirits, both neophytes, elementals, as well as sentients. There's divinities, and there's primordial beings as well. Just flip about, doing what they do, and sometimes we cross paths with them, and half the time they just look at you and think, whatever, and they move on. Just for a bit of fun, Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. Neanderthal. This is what they would look like in modern society. Not that bad, eh? I mean, she's quite striking, really.
She looks like Stacey Solomon.
Yeah, I mean, she's got the wider mouth because obviously they're meat eaters,
and
the bigger nose, and the brow ridges. But it's not unreasonable a look. I mean, she's still strong as hell. I mean, if you were in a relationship with her and you got into a row, this is not a girl that's going to throw the frying pan at you. She's going to throw you at the frying pan. That's how strong she is. 8 to 10 times stronger than a man. The average human man in the current days. But I said to you at the earlier part that Neanderthals were mixed with us, including the features. And here's a couple. On the left is Melanie Copeland. Her DNA signature is 9% Neanderthal. And there's Ritu Ratul. On the right, she's from India. And she actually lists herself as Neanderthal woman. And her DNA package is 8%. And again, you can see the contributing factors: the high and deep ridge on the forehead, the wide, big nose, wide mouth, average height 5'6", the pair of them, and strong as oxes. Both of them actually talk about that. Melanie Copeland has been building her own house. Her husband is as thin as a twig and could easily get blown away in a breeze. She's the one that lugs all the timber and the building materials around. You can find her channel on YouTube. And Rita Ratul is actually a biochemist. She studies DNA. She studied her own. That's how she knows she's 8% Neanderthal. And why she calls herself Neanderthal woman. Amazing people. Yeah, Melanie Copeland, Simple Life Reclaimed. She does talk about the fact that she knows that she has heightened Neanderthal traits. And you can actually see that in her spirituality, because she's more, not so much about sort of a Christian, although the area it lives in is part of the Bible Belt. She is more of a sort of towards the spiritual side. Rita is a Hindu, and that's pagan anyway. But this is, both of these people live out in the sticks, out in the middle of nowhere. Neither of them are afraid of the dark. Neither of them are really afraid of the boogeyman or the ideas of that. These are just normal people with a heightened Neanderthal element into them, but they are robust, they are fit, they are healthy, and they are living life, and they are free of fear. So, in sort of post, everything that I talked about, all the sort of history of the different types of humans or humanities that existed, it is only really within the last 2,000 years here in the West, in around sort of the Jewish countries of the land of Canaan and Judea and Elam, do we see this notion of demons, demonic forces and satanic forces that are created to position the public into having a fear of the unknown. Gone are their own priests and priestesses that would have guided them through the fears and trials and tribulations of what's unknown. So it becomes known. And that's with our ancestors. They did not always know everything. So they would set ideas about that this was maybe a god or a goddess or some kind of high energy being that would be creating this, until they found out that it was actually a more of a regular occurrence. But which case, oh, all right, okay, whatever, and moved on from it, and they lost that sort of trepidation about those things, and that thing didn't seem to be no longer outside of the normal, and that becomes habit. And once you get to know what things are, they're no longer outside of the normal, they're no longer the paranormal, they just become normal. So for me, now you might have a different opinion on this, but for me, the paranormal is a contrivance that's now easily used to or exploited to sort of identify something that we don't know. Oh, it's paranormal. Well, have you found out what it is yet? Or have you actually looked into what it is? Well, no. It's just one of those things. It's sort of supernatural things. Get in there, find out what it is. You know, it's not going to be fearful. Your fear is the biggest hindrance, not it, not the unknowing. Yeah? You know, we're part of a pagan community. You didn't, an old medieval witch or a cutwife or a midwife, she's walking, she's just finished her last birthing or childbirth. She's walking down through the woods to her little hut or house. I don't think she's got any fear, do you? She's got more fear of the living than she has of the dead. The dead she can put in place. Something paranormal in her world. She just uses natural forces, natural abilities. No fear. There's only two things in the dark that can be fearful. The person that you don't know, that's living, or falling over something.
Yeah, and that's just it about the dark, isn't it? Especially nowadays. You don't know who is in the dark, flesh-wise.
Yeah. Well, our ancestors had a problem with the dark because we were not apex predators. So there would be critters out there, lions, mountain lions, all different types of wolves and whatnot, that would see us as food. So you can understand that there would be this sort of sixth sense idea of being aware of a predator. But again, it's a physical thing.
Yeah, but now we have human predators.
Yeah. That's the biggest problem.
Night.
That's the biggest problem.
Trouble is, then these human predators are not just out at night, they're out in the day now as well.
Yes, unfortunately.
So there is a fear of dark and daylight.
Yeah, it depends on where you are. Pseudoscience nowadays, yeah. That's there is a lot of pseudoscience. You may have had a point there, Karen. They do. There's a lot of people that invent things, and it's very, very easy to debunk. I'm sat here having my breakfast in the morning. I'll go through 4 or 5 of them, sometimes 6, and debunk them with simple science like physics or chemistry or biology, or sometimes just with common sense. You know, people will jump onto the bandwagon, particularly when it's through social media, because they want the clicks, they want the likes, they want the comments, because the more likes and the more comments they get, the more money they make through advertising. That's what it's about. It's not about actually telling you that what's real and what's not. It's about how much money they can make. Because the more people that view their stuff, the more people that like it, the more money they make from the advertiser. So when something goes viral, the guy's sitting there going, "Oh yes, thank you very much. That's another $30,000 this month." Yeah, it's always about the money. It's never about the truth. So pseudoscience is a good thing, because even if it becomes sort of viral because of people's disagreement, he's still laughing because he's still making money. And he's got everybody else running around in circles, getting tied up in knots over a bunch of nonsense, and he's making dollars. Yeah. Anyway, I think that will do for that. Like I said, if you got any questions, just drop me a question. You know, just in the group, ask a question. Either I'll come on here, I will be coming on here again on Saturday evening, because that will be last light. So I might answer some of your questions then. But until then, have a good evening.